Arrest him. He doesn't belong here. The sentence didn't climb. It fell hard and flat onto the asphalt of Silver Pines, cracking the quiet like a dropped plate. People always said the neighborhood sounded like money. Sprinklers whispering over laid sod, electric garage doors purring into place, wind chimes tuned to pretty keys. But that afternoon, the only sound anyone would remember was a woman's voice carrying anger to the end of the block. He's only 8 years old. Clutching a stuffed dinosaur while police circle around him. All because he picked up a leaf. In that moment, the whole neighborhood held its breath, and the world was about to find out the truth. This is not just a story about one boy. It's about how innocence collides with prejudice, and how one mother's voice can change everything. Stay with us, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit subscribe and join our journey. Martha Collins stood a few steps off her porch, arm lifted as if pointing out a snake. Her face had that tight, pink look she got when something violated the rules she believed she lived by. In her hand, a phone gleamed. The camera eye looked where she looked. She'd pressed the word record before she left the house, the way other people checked that they'd locked their doors. Down by the row of community mailboxes, a small black boy sat on the curb beside a blue bike that had seen better paint. He had a plastic container clamped in one hand and a stuffed dinosaur crushed to his chest in the other. Tears survived the back of his wrist and cut clean tracks down the dried salt on his cheeks. He wasn't old enough to hide his fear or to package it as anger. He just looked small, like fear had shrunk him. "I just want my mom," he said. And the words were so soft that only the people closest to him heard. But somehow, because of the way his mouth worked around them, the rest of the block understood anyway. Someone halfway up the hill said, "What's going on?" Another answered, "Martha," again, with that mix of annoyance and relief people feel when a situation has a designated villain. A gate clicked. A dog barked 3 times and then stopped, like it had remembered the rules. 2. The light that day had the gentle tilt of early autumn. A loose red leaf rocked in a pothole puddle that shouldn't have been there because the HOA sent emails about things like that. The leaf flipped once, twice, as a breeze slipped up the street. The boy watched that leaf as if it were a hand held out to him. The breeze touched his hair and went on, indifferent. "Martha, maybe we should just—" A neighbor began. "We should just nothing," Martha said without looking back. "I saw him at the mailboxes. I saw him go through. He couldn't say where he lives. He's casing," she had trained her voice to carry. For years she'd trained children to use inside voices and outside ones. Now she used hers like a baton. "It's a child," the neighbor tried again. "Softer. That's how it starts," Martha said. "You people keep pretending not to notice. Then it starts happening to you." Lights flashed at the far end of the street. Red, blue clean and bright and official. The sirens were on that low setting that doesn't scream, just tells you you're already late. Doors opened farther up the block. Shadow shapes moved behind privacy glass. A woman in gym clothes crouched on her porch steps with her phone up, as if this were fireworks in July. The boy folded over his dinosaur and breathed like he'd forgotten how. He had the look of someone running through instructions in his head, in case doing all the right steps could build a bridge over the sudden drop in the path. He swallowed. He tried again. "I'm not bad," he told the dinosaur, or the mailbox, or the air. "I'm not." He lifted the plastic container half an inch, almost apologetically, as if it should explain everything. A see-through box full of leaves the color of coins and blood and old paper. He had arranged them the way children organize treasure, carefully, by a logic that needs no audience. Martha watched the container like it was ticking. Silver Pines was the kind of place that believed in its own good. People had chosen it out of maps and rankings and school scores and commute times. They had stood in kitchens looking at quartz countertops and imagining meals that would fix something. They had walked circles around staged furniture thinking, "Here, we will be the people we plan to be. If anything rotten boiled up in a place like that, it had to come from outside. It couldn't be in the soil. From where he stood behind the hydrangeas, Mr. Patel pressed his hand over his chest without meaning to. He owned a hardware store 20 minutes away. He could talk you through a water heater replacement in a storm. But he had a grandson the same size as that boy, and fear was an old reflex older than any house in Silver Pines. Next door, Mrs. Lynn pulled her watering can back a foot, water sloshing onto her shoes. She looked at the boy, then at Martha, then at the road where the lights were blooming brighter. She thought about the way a child's face changes when he realizes the rules he's been taught don't work. The sirens rolled up on the wind like a storm crossfading into a sunny day. The boy's shoulders hunched, not at the volume, but at what the sound meant. People like to say kids don't understand. Kids understand too quickly. The bicycle's kickstand sank deeper into the soft edge of the grass. Just stay there, Martha told him, as if he'd been trying to vanish. You're not going anywhere. He didn't move. He couldn't have moved even if he'd wanted to. He did what children do when they run out of power. He went still. A white sedan turned the corner and kept going. Its driver glanced, stared, then remembered the deliveries he had to make. A crow watched from the telephone line, cocked its head, then dropped to the gutter to pick at something invisible to everyone else. The crow didn't know about neighborhoods, didn't know about belonging. It knew about thresholds and movement and threat. When the sirens moved close enough to scratch at the crow's nerves, it lifted away and left the scene to humans. 3 cruisers came in at an angle that said, "We know where to stop." Tires bit inside. Doors popped. Radios flashed to life. Boots found the ground. The cops took shape around their uniforms, the way men step into waders, practical, practiced, contained. They didn't rush. Rushing was for amateurs. Harris came out first. He had the look of someone born with a furrow between his eyes. His hair had gone gray in a way that made everyone call him solid without thinking about what the word cost. He took a breath and his shoulders rose, slow and square, and then settled like a gate swinging shut on its hinges. With him, a taller man, Doyle, whose default setting was forward, as if he had spent his whole life leaning into wind. Last Reyes, smaller, mouth set in a line that could be mistaken for nothing until you watched her listen. They saw Martha, first because she placed herself to be seen. She had stepped into the road, not enough to block it, just enough to be unavoidable. She pointed without flinching and spoke without waiting to be asked. "There," she said. "That one," and then they saw the boy. Men who do this long enough get good at taking in everything in a single glance. Their eyes flick to edges you don't notice. The hands, the pockets, the bag, the distance to the door. But for a fraction too small to measure, Harris's gaze landed on the stuffed dinosaur, on the way the toy's stitched smile caught the light. He didn't let the fraction show. "Name," he said, walking the line between command and question. The boy's mouth opened and closed. "Ethan," he said finally, like it might not be the right answer. "Address?" Ethan lifted his chin toward a run of roofs, numbers hidden on mailboxes, a logic that adults carry in their heads like maps. "There," he said, and his hand made a vague, trembling sweep that could have meant one house or 3 or the idea of home. "We'll get there," Martha said, too bright. He already said the wrong one. "Fort Welve," he said. Then he changed it. "I heard," Doyle's jaw rolled. He didn't look at Martha. He looked at Ethan like the boy was a locked door he knew how to open. "What were you doing at the mailboxes?" Ethan lifted the container again, the smallest inch. "Leaves," he said. There, he stopped as if the rest of the sentence might be a mistake. "I was just collecting." "Collecting," Martha said, and made the word sound like shoplifting. She angled her phone so the clear box filled the frame. "Some kind of tool," she narrated, for the feed she imagined would need her as voiceover. "Tampering," Reyes's eyes stayed on Ethan's face. She took one half-step sideways, not toward him, not toward the others. It looked like nothing unless you knew what it means to make a child space. "Hey," she said, not too soft, not too loud. "Breathe with me. In through your nose. 1, 2, 3. She held up her hand and counted out the air. He tried. He counted in his head because numbers were rules that never yelled. At 2, a siren chopped at the air, and he flinched. At 3, he made a sound that was part breath, part apology. The dinosaur's plush body took the brunt of his hands. Harris slid a notepad out of a pocket and put it away again. He said, "Let's take a look," and nodded at the container. Ethan peeled the lid and the smell of crushed leaves slipped out, clean and almost sweet. They lay layered, a collage of a season's shift, edges curling and veins road mapping into the stems. On top, the red one, the one that looked like somebody had painted it to be a fake of itself, caught a flare of light, then went dull again. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. It wasn't reverence. It was the interruption of expectation. Then reality snapped back. "Okay," Harris said. He let the lid settle back into place. "We're going to sort this out. We should cuff him," Martha said quickly, as if they might let her drive the car next. He could run. The look Harris gave her wasn't a look at all. It was a non-event, the way professionals refuse to acknowledge suggestions from the audience. "We'll sort it out," he repeated. He said it to the boy, not to her. "Please," Ethan said, and the word pointed in a dozen directions at once. "Please, I just want my mom. Do you have a number?" Reyes asked. He lifted his wrist. A cheap blue watch with oversized buttons blinked a cartoon cloud. He mashed at the side, and a settings screen appeared instead of a contact list. His shoulders went rigid with shame, a child's certainty he'd broken something expensive and unforgivable. "May I?" Reyes asked. She didn't reach until he nodded. She pressed one button, then another, and waited. "It's ringing," she said. It wasn't. The network hiccuped. She tried again and again. She left a voicemail in a voice that had convinced rooms full of people to calm down. A car turned onto the street and slowed as it passed, driver rubbernecking because he was human. The woman on the fitness porch adjusted her angle to get the lights and the boy in the same shot. On the lawn opposite, Mr. Patel moved his hand from his chest to his pocket, and then, without taking out his phone, put his hand back in place. "Look," a voice said from a doorway. "That's the Johnson kid. They moved in last week." It was a woman in a flour-dusted apron. She had not decided which side she was on, but she had decided she was on the record. He hung that wind chime with his mom. "That chime?" Reyes asked, and the woman nodded. The bamboo tube shifted and clicked, a winter bear sound in a fall afternoon, the clack of bone and breath. Martha rolled her eyes without moving them. "This is a pattern," she said, as if she had charts and a laser pointer. "It all starts as nothing. Then one day it's your porch." Doyle's radio said something that only cops hear. Harris listened with the part of his brain that knows street names and codes for the same problem with a different face. "We'll walk to your house," he said to Ethan. "You can show us. We'll make sure you're safe. All right?" Ethan nodded like nodding might keep things from breaking. He stood, too fast, and stars pricked his vision. The dinosaur slid and thumped. He grabbed it, grateful to have something that stayed in his hands. The group moved up the sidewalk. The boy with a bike he wasn't riding. 2 officers close enough to catch him if he fell or bolted. Reyes a half pace back, because that's where you put someone trying to play both shield and bridge. Martha followed like a narrative that refused to end, talking to the camera in a tone designed to sound reasonable on playback. They stopped at a neat porch under a trellis where something purple was still brave against the season. The number on the mailbox read 421. The nameplate said Johnson in letters meant to be unobtrusive. Harris rang the bell. Inside, The chime echoed the ache in Ethan's throat. No answering footsteps. The camera above the door looked like an eye that had chosen to stay shut. "See?" Martha said, triumphant. "No one home. Abandoned." "I'm not abandoned," Ethan said. And the anger in his voice was new thin. "But there," and just for a second his face belonged to someone older. Reyes put her palm out without touching his shoulder. "You're not," she said. Same tone she'd used for a witness on a stand who needed one more question to get to the truth. Harris talked on the radio again in that code room tone. Words like confirm and owner and ETA scattered between static. He hung the mic back on his shoulder without a performance. The neighbors on the sidewalk leaned closer as if sound traveled better when paired with interest. 10 minutes is an hour. When you are 8 and scared and the world has tilted under your bike. The weight ate Ethan in slow bites. He watched the bamboo tubes bump each other. He watched a fly explore the porch light and then make a different decision. He watched his own shoe toe nudge an invisible line in the porch paint and tried not to do it again. He thought about the red leaf because it was something he could hold in his head without it hurting him. At 9 minutes. The street filled with sound again. The black SUV slid against the curb with the confidence of someone who'd memorized the address years ago. The driver's door swung open before the engine finished its objection. A woman in a black suit got out and closed the space between the car and the porch like she owned the air. "Mom!" Ethan's voice snapped the world into the shape it should have had all along. He ran. The dinosaur bounced between his arm and his ribs. He hit her like small bodies hit, entirely, trusting that the person they hit will absorb impact and fear together. She folded him in, hands smoothing down his hair, mouth at his temple. "I'm here," she said, and at last the words went in and stayed. When she looked up, her face carried a stillness that meant heat. She had a courtroom in her eyes and the habit of not filling silences with anything but expectation. "Who decided my son belonged in the middle of the street?" she asked, and it wasn't loud, but it made people straighten. Harris stepped forward because that was his job. He had explanations he could use: duty, procedure, the call, the response, the facts we had at the time, but he didn't lead with any of them. He said, "We got a call," because it was the start that did not lie. "Suspicious behavior?" she asked, the words clean, not mocked, not echoed, just quoted back like exhibit labels. "A child with a box of leaves?" Martha opened her mouth to reclaim the narrative, then closed it when the woman turned her head. It wasn't a glare. It was worse, a level gaze assessing whether someone had standing. Martha, for once, did not. Ethan's breath had slowed under his mother's hand. The dinosaur's fur was damp where his face had been. He turned it and pressed his cheek to a dry patch like turning a pillow to the cool side. He whispered something into her jacket, nothing longer than 3 words. Something like, "I did nothing," or "I'm not bad," the short phrases kids summon when they don't have energy for longer ones. "I know," she said to that, and whatever pronoun it carried. "I know." Behind them, the wind found the chime and made it speak in clean syllables. The light had shifted. People had stepped forward until they realized they had, and then stepped back. This is where someone always says the words that change what kind of story it is. Whether it becomes a mess or a reckoning. Whether it wraps up with a shrug, or whether it keeps unspooling into the places where choices get made. On Silver Pines that day, the words would come later, the official ones, the recorded ones, the ones sworn under penalty of perjury. For now there was the boy and his mother, and a street full of people deciding who they would be when they told the story that night. Harris glanced at Reyes and saw her looking at the boy like he was a person, not a problem. He saw Doyle bite back an instinct because all eyes were on him. He saw Martha's hand hover, not sure whether to keep filming or to put the phone down and become, at last, part of what was happening. Someone far away turned off a lawnmower and the quiet tightened again. The woman bent and kissed her son's hair. She breathed in the smell of him, the sun and the fear, and that clean leaf crush scent he had carried home on purpose. She straightened and squared herself in a way that aligned more than her shoulders. "We're finished with this part," she said to the officers, voice even. "We're going inside." No one moved for a beat. Then they did. The boy scooped up his dinosaur in his box. The mother put a hand between his shoulder blades in the easy, ordinary guide parents use in grocery store aisles and parking lots and on days nothing goes wrong. They stepped up onto their porch, where the number read what it read and the name said what it said. The key turned in the lock. The door opened. The air changed. On the sidewalk, Silver Pines exhaled, but it wasn't relief. It was the knowledge that there would be more to say, and that some of them would be expected to say it out loud. The wind lifted once, as if the neighborhood had been a pond and someone had tossed a stone long and flat enough to skip the whole surface. The red leaf in the pothole spun, and then, at last, slid to the curb and stayed. Inside, a mother and her son crossed the threshold. Outside, the people of Silver Pines looked at one another and pretended they hadn't. The afternoon leaned toward evening the way a verdict leans toward an answer. And though no one said it yet, the story had chosen its path. Ethan Johnson never imagined this day would turn into a nightmare. For him, it was just another afternoon in Silver Pines, a neighborhood that felt strange and promising all at once. At 8 years old, he carried with him a boundless imagination, bright eyes, and the innocent belief that every fallen leaf was a letter from the wind. He never thought his little collection could bother anyone. In a clear plastic box, he arranged the leaves the way other kids might arrange treasures, yellowed ones curling at the edges, green ones still clinging to life, a single bright red one glowing in the middle like a ruby among stones. His father, a firefighter, had been the first to tell him about the wind. Before he died in a blaze 2 years earlier, he gave Ethan a stuffed gray dinosaur. "His name is Rex," he had said, smoke still clinging to his jacket. "He'll guard your sleep when I can't." Rex went everywhere with Ethan, tucked into his bed, crammed into his backpack, riding in the basket of his bike. The boy believed Rex could listen to the wind, and the leaves were proof the wind answered back. Once, some kids at school laughed and called him Leaf Boy, but Ethan just smiled. "You don't hear what I hear," he said. To him, the wind carried voices others ignored, and in those whispers he found comfort. A few miles away, Linda Johnson was presiding over a property dispute in court. In her black suit, she projected the steadiness of someone who'd fought to be there and had no intention of backing down. At 40, she carried the weight of being the county's first black female judge. Years of whispers behind her back, a black woman on the bench, had taught her to keep her spine straight and her tone firm. Every verdict she gave wasn't just justice for the case. It was a door pried open for whoever might come after. She moved her son to Silver Pines because it promised good schools and safe streets. She wanted Ethan to grow up surrounded by opportunity, not limits. Money was tight, every paycheck calculated to the penny, but she believed he deserved more than what life had given her. That morning before court, Linda crouched to tie his sneakers, straightened his backpack, and pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Remember, Ethan, stay curious but stay safe. I'll be home before dark." He nodded with a grin that made her believe the world couldn't possibly harm him. She was wrong. Across the street, behind lace curtains, Martha Collins watched. Once, she had been a teacher with a soft voice for storybooks. But after a bitter divorce and years without steady work, softness hardened. Without a classroom to control, she turned the neighborhood into her territory. She memorized trash pickup schedules, logged who mowed their lawn on time, graded her neighbors without their consent. People muttered, "the gatekeeper," under their breath, careful she didn't hear. When the Johnsons moved in, Martha felt something fisher. A black single mother and her son settling into a house as nice as hers. She didn't say it aloud, but resentment tightened in her chest. She told herself she was defending the neighborhood's safety. The truth was simpler. Control was the last thing she thought she had left, and she would not give it up. Ethan spent his first week listening to the bamboo wind chime his mother had hung on the porch. He believed the chime sang along with the leaves, sending messages everywhere. One afternoon, as he sat cross-legged pressing a leaf into his notebook, Martha peered through her curtains and muttered, "Odd little boy." At court, Linda was fighting through a subtle but vicious discrimination case. During recess, she glanced at Ethan's school photo propped on her desk, his forced smile in a stiff uniform, and felt steadier. She didn't know that while she was battling injustice in the courtroom, injustice was already creeping toward her front door. Martha grew more obsessed. She scribbled notes in a little pad. The boy lingers at mailboxes. Carries a plastic container. Could be hiding something inside. To her, it was evidence. To anyone else, it would have been absurd. Then came the afternoon when Ethan rode his bike down to the community mailboxes. The air smelled of cut grass and dry leaves. There, among the yellow and brown, he spotted a brilliant red leaf. "A letter from the wind," he whispered, delighted. To him, it was a treasure. Through her window, Martha narrowed her eyes. In her head, harmless curiosity twisted into threat. She left her house in a hurry, stepped sharp on the pavement. That was the moment the wind shifted, though Ethan didn't know it yet. Ethan held the red leaf like it was something alive. Its veins glowed faintly in the afternoon sun, each line delicate as handwriting. He smiled the small private smile of someone who had found a secret meant just for them. He slipped it carefully into the plastic box with the others, then reached for Rex, pressing the dinosaur's soft nose to the lid like a ritual of approval. That was when the footsteps came hard and quick, echoing against the pavement. Ethan looked up, startled, as Martha Collins stormed across the street. Her lips were tight, her eyes sharp as glass. She walked like she was late to catch someone in the act. "Hey!" Her voice cracked the air, loud enough for curtains to stir along the row of houses. "What do you think you're doing?" Ethan froze. The box nearly slipped from his hands. His voice faltered. He glanced at the mailboxes behind him, then at the leaf in his box. "I was just collecting leaves." Martha's hand shot out faster than he could react. She plucked the red leaf from the box and held it up like contraband. "Collecting? Don't lie to me. You were at the mailboxes. You think I don't see?" "Please," Ethan's words tangled in his throat. "That's mine. It's a letter from the wind." The woman barked a laugh, sharp and mean. "A letter from the wind? That's the best you can come up with?" She took a step closer, towering over him. "What's your address, huh? Where do you live?" Ethan's chest heaved. His brain scrambled through numbers, through the neat row of houses that all looked the same. 412. He stopped. No, that wasn't it. 421, huh? Martha's triumph flared bright in her eyes. "You don't even know your own address." "You can't fool me." She pointed at the box again. "What else are you hiding in there? Stolen mail? Notes you were sent to deliver?" Tears prickled hot at Ethan's eyes. He hugged Rex so tightly that the seams squeaked. "No," he whispered. "It's just leaves. My dad, His voice broke. "Enough." Martha snapped the word like chalk breaking on a blackboard. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her thumb moving with certainty. "We'll let the police figure it out." Ethan's stomach flipped. Police. His mind flooded with half-remembered lessons. Police catch bad guys. Police come when something is wrong. If they were coming for him, what did that make him? Martha's voice shifted as she spoke into the phone, smooth now, dripping with feigned concern. "Yes, I'd like to report suspicious activity at Silver Pines. A black boy at the community mailbox is possibly tampering. He has some kind of device, a box he's carrying. Doesn't know his address. Looks abandoned or trained to snoop." Yes, please come quickly before he runs. The words lodged in Ethan's chest like stones. He glanced at the box in his hands. Device. Tampering. She was talking about his leaves. I'm not bad, he whispered again, to Rex, to the wind, to anyone who might listen. I just want my mom. From far away, the first wail of a siren sliced into the air. The siren grew louder, a low moan at first, then sharper, cutting through the neighborhood's neat order like a crack spreading through glass. Curtains lifted, doors cracked open. Silver Pines, normally a chorus of sprinklers and wind chimes, now hummed with whispers. On the porch across the street, Mr. Patel squinted into the sun. He saw the boy first, small frame, hands locked around a stuffed dinosaur, eyes wide like an animal caught in headlights. His stomach tightened. Looks just like my grandson, he thought, and his hand gripped the porch rail without realizing. Farther down, Mrs. Lynn stepped outside with her watering can, water spilling onto her shoes as she froze. She followed the sound, her gaze landing on Martha standing tall, phone still in hand, expression righteous. And then she looked at the boy, and her chest pinched. Something about the way his little shoulders shook, like he was already bracing for punishment, made her throat ache. The sirens were close now, bouncing off manicured facades, flashing red and blue light into window panes. Ethan shrank lower, pressing Rex to his face. The dinosaur smelled of dust and faint detergent, but to Ethan it smelled like home. I'm not running, he whispered. I'm not. Stay right there, Martha barked, as though he'd tried to bolt. They'll be here any second. She turned in a slow circle, broadcasting her voice to the audience she knew she had. I caught him red-handed, lurking around the mailboxes, carrying some kind of device. Couldn't even tell me where he lives. This is exactly how trouble starts. Trouble? Mr. Patel muttered under his breath. He's a child. Martha shot him a look sharp enough to slice. And children are used all the time. You'd be surprised. The cruisers appeared, 3 of them, turning onto Silver Pines in a formation that seemed rehearsed. Tires squealed faintly, then gripped the pavement. The sirens cut off, leaving only the hum of engines and the tense silence of a street holding its breath. Doors flung open. Out stepped the officers, each carrying himself differently. Harris, seasoned, with a face weathered into permanent suspicion. Doyle, taller, jaw tight, scanning the scene like he'd already decided something. Reyes, younger, slower, her eyes flicking first to the boy, then to the dinosaur in his arms. Ethan's breath hitched. He couldn't move. He couldn't even cry now. The tears had frozen behind his eyes. All he could hear was the pounding in his chest, loud as the sirens had been. Name, Harris demanded, voice even, clipped. Ethan, the boy stammered, too fast, too soft. Address? Doyle barked. 412 no, 421. Ethan mumbled, his tongue stumbling. Martha laughed, triumphant. See, first he said 412. Now it's 421. He doesn't even know where he lives. Doyle's jaw shifted. Why were you at the mailboxes? Ethan lifted the plastic container, shaking slightly. Leaves, he said, voice cracking. They're just leaves. Leaves, Martha repeated with disdain, swinging her phone to catch the box in her frame. That's his cover story. A box of leaves. Reyes tilted her head, crouching slightly, enough to soften the angle between her and the child. Hey, she said gently. Can you show me? Ethan peeled open the lid. Inside, the layers of autumn spilled out, green fading into yellow, brown edges curling inward, one brilliant red leaf glowing like fire. For just a moment, the street went quiet, then Martha scoffed. Really? That's supposed to fool us? Harris closed the lid again, expression unreadable. He clicked his radio, murmuring codes the neighbors couldn't understand. Doyle's eyes stayed on Ethan, hard, unblinking. Reyes, though, kept her gaze on the boy's trembling hands. Please, Ethan whispered again, voice breaking. "I just want my mom." The neighbors shifted uneasily. The gym-clad woman on her porch lowered her phone an inch, unsure whether she was filming safety or cruelty. Mrs. Lynn set down her watering can. Mr. Patel whispered something in a language only he understood. The air in Silver Pines felt heavier, as if the street itself was waiting to see what would happen next. The sunlight, once golden, now felt harsh, exposing every tense face on the street. Martha hovered close behind the officers, her phone angled high, broadcasting the scene like she was the heroine of some neighborhood crusade. "Don't let that act fool you," she pressed. "He's been circling the block for nearly an hour, looking into yards, poking at mailboxes. You think it's an accident he can't remember his own address?" Harris adjusted his belt, the picture of procedure. He didn't answer her, didn't answer anyone. But the way he studied Ethan measuring, cataloging said enough. Doyle stepped forward, the rubber of his boots crunching the edge of the curb. He was taller than Ethan by a mile, shadow swallowing the boy whole. "Stand up," he ordered. "We're going to figure this out at the station." The words knocked the air out of Ethan's chest. Station. The word sounded heavy, like bars and locks and forever. His knees buckled. He clutched Rex so tightly the fabric stretched. "No." His voice came out cracked, high, broken. "Please, I didn't do anything. I was just looking for leaves." Doyle's brows lowered. "That's enough. Let's go." He reached for the boy's arm, but Reyes's voice cut through, soft but firm. "He's 8 years old." The tension on the street thickened. Harris shot her a quick glance warning, subtle, but there. Doyle kept his hand extended, but it hovered in hesitation. Ethan's neighbors edged closer now. Mr. Patel, shaking his head, raised his voice. "Officers, I saw him. The boy wasn't hurting anyone. And I did too," Mrs. Lynn added, voice trembling but clear. "He was playing. That's all." Martha whipped around, eyes blazing. "Of course you'd take his side. You don't know what I saw. You don't know what kind of tricks these people." She cut herself short, but the damage hung in the air, sour and unmistakable. Doyle straightened, his hand curling into a fist at his side. He didn't need to say it. The crowd was dividing, and he wasn't about to look soft. Reyes, though, moved closer to Ethan, crouching so her eyes were level with his. "Hey, buddy," she said gently. "You like dinosaurs?" Ethan blinked, surprised, clutching Rex tighter. He's a T-Rex," he whispered. Reyes smiled faintly, just enough for him to see. "Looks tough. Bet he keeps you safe, huh?" For the first time since the sirens arrived, Ethan nodded. It was small, fragile, but it was something. Behind them, Martha's voice rose again, shrill with indignation. "Are you seriously entertaining this nonsense? He doesn't belong here. You're wasting time when you should be." "Enough," Harris barked, sharper than he'd intended. The neighborhood stilled. Even Martha froze, words caught behind her teeth. Ethan trembled, staring at the ground, waiting for the next command, the next hand to drag him away. Somewhere beyond the cul-de-sac, an engine roared. A sleek black SUV turned the corner, tires spitting gravel as it rolled fast down the street. Heads turned, neighbors murmured. Ethan lifted his face, eyes wide. He knew that sound. That car. Hope lit in his chest, sudden and wild. "Mom?" His voice cracked in disbelief. The SUV stopped hard. The driver's door flung open. Out stepped Linda Johnson, still in her dark suit from court, heels clicking like hammers on pavement. Her gaze locked on the scene, on her son crumpled against the curb, surrounded by uniforms. Her voice sliced the silence. "Get away from him." "That's my son." The words hit like thunder. The crowd parted without thinking, neighbors stepping back as Linda cut through them, each stride fueled by fury and fear. The afternoon air vibrated with her presence. Ethan scrambled to his feet, Rex clutched in one hand and launched himself into her arms. "Mom!" He sobbed, his small body collapsing against her. "I wasn't bad, I promise. I just wanted to find a leaf," Linda bent, gathering him tight against her chest, one hand smoothing his curls, the other gripping his trembling back. She kissed the top of his head, her own voice breaking despite the steel in it. "Baby. You didn't do anything wrong. You hear me?" "Nothing wrong." The officers froze, uncertain. Reyes's shoulders dropped in visible relief, but Harris stiffened. Doyle's jaw clenched. Linda lifted her eyes, meeting each of theirs in turn. Her gaze didn't waver. "Who put their hands on my child?" Harris cleared his throat, his voice clipped, defensive. "Ma'am, we received a call about suspicious activity. We were just responding. Suspicious activity." Linda's tone cut like glass. She gestured at the box of leaves spilled open on the sidewalk. "That's what you think is a threat? A little boy with a stuffed dinosaur and autumn leaves?" Doyle stepped in, tone sharper than his partner's. He gave us conflicting addresses. He couldn't explain why he was near the mailboxes. "We had reason to." "You had reason to what?" Linda snapped, her voice rising now. The neighbors leaned closer, breaths held. "Drag a child into the back of a squad car because a bitter neighbor said so. You couldn't see the tears in his eyes. You couldn't hear him begging for me." Reyes opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands flexed at her sides, guilt flashing across her face. Linda turned to Martha, who still stood smug, phone in hand though her grip trembled. "And you," her words dripped acid. "You called the police on an 8-year-old boy for collecting leaves. You lied. You made him a target." Martha's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her throat bobbed. The certainty she had worn like armor cracked under Linda's gaze. The crowd, silent until now, began to stir. Murmurs rose. "She's right. It's just a kid." This went too far. Mr. Patel shook his head, muttering angrily to himself. Mrs. Lynn wiped at her cheek. Tears she hadn't realized were there streaking her face. Linda shifted Ethan on her hip, his arms looped tight around her neck. She squared her shoulders, voice steady and commanding now. "I am Judge Linda Johnson, and I am telling you, my son will not be treated like a criminal in his own neighborhood. Not today. Not ever again." The weight of her words dropped heavy over the cul-de-sac. The officers stiffened. Martha went pale. The neighbors stood, caught between shame and awakening. Ethan sniffled into his mother's collar, clutching Rex so hard the seams whined. For the first time that afternoon, he felt safe. The silence stretched, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Everyone knew nothing in Silver Pines would ever feel the same again. Linda didn't raise her voice again. She didn't need to. The steadiness in her tone did what shouting never could. It organized the air. "Badge numbers." She sighed. Harris's hand twitched toward his chest, reflex and habit. "Ma'am, badge numbers," Linda repeated, eyes on him, then on Doyle, then on Reyes. Slowly, Harris recited his. Reyes followed, clear, almost relieved to be asked. Doyle dragged his out like it cost him something to say. "And yours," Linda said, pivoting the way she would in court. She pointed at Martha's phone. "Name and address." Martha blinked, thrown off script. "I am a resident here. So is my son," Linda said. "Name, address." She didn't fill the space with threat. She let the law sit in it. "You made a report. It will be documented under penalty of perjury." Martha swallowed. "Martha Collins, 420 Silver Pines." Her voice shrank as she spoke. "Thank you," Linda said evenly. She adjusted Ethan on her hip, felt the hitching breath against her collarbone. "Ethan, breathe with me," she murmured. And they counted a small private rhythm, 1, 2, 3 in, 1, 2, 3 out until his grip eased a fraction. "Dispatch," Harris said into his radio, a lower register now. "We've got contact with the juvenile's guardian." Confirm identity. Mother states she is Judge Linda Johnson. He listened, head cocked, eyes fixed on a neutral point between porch and sidewalk. A beat, a crackle. Confirmed, he said. There it was. The shift none of them could pretend didn't happen. The instant the system recognized one of its own, Harris cleared his throat. Ma'am, he started, we responded to a call. We followed procedure. We were verifying an address and a guardian. You had an ID, Linda cut in, nodding at the laminated card peeking from the plastic box where Ethan had stuffed it earlier. You had a frightened child with a toy in his hands. You had witnesses. She swept her gaze to Mrs. Lynn, to Mr. Patel, to the woman in gym clothes who now looked like she wanted to sink into her own porch steps. And you had a neighbor whose language revealed more than she intended. Martha flinched. I meant this is a safe neighborhood. We have standards. You have assumptions, Linda said, not unkindly, and somehow that made it worse. And you weaponize them. Doyle stepped forward half a pace, the step of a man used to owning ground. With respect, Judge, we can't just ignore a citizen's report. He gave conflicting addresses. He was at the mailboxes. We can't afford to be naive. Linda's eyes flickered to Ethan's face, then back. Believing a child with a box of leaves is not naivety. It's discernment. You read what's in front of you, not what fear paints over it. She let a breath out slow. And you put your hands down. Reyes moved first, palms visible, body angled to shield without challenging. We're ending the call, she said to Harris. A suggestion disguised as a fact. Harris looked at Ethan again, at the dinosaur's frayed seam, at the small heel grinding anxiously into the porch step, at the wind lifting a strand of the boy's hair, and nodded. Dispatch, concludes Silver Pine's incident. No further action. Doyle started to say something, then didn't. The radio on his shoulder hissed and went quiet. Martha's phone was still raised. She realized it all at once, as if waking. Her arms sagged, then dropped to her side. A nervous tremor pulsed in her wrist. You can't just let this go, she said, brittle. What if next time it's not leaves? What if next time, Linda said, you ask a child a question like you expect to hear an answer that isn't a confession? That's not how the world works, Martha snapped, finding the heat again because cold shame was worse. You don't get to be careless just because you... She stopped, the rest curdling on her tongue. Because I'm what? Linda asked gently. Because my son is what? Martha's gaze flicked to the faces around her, searching for an ally and finding only witnesses. Because you people always make it about. Reyes cut in, quiet but firm. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to stop. Martha, Mr. Patel said, voice shaking. Please. The gym-clad woman set her own phone down on her lap like it had turned hot. I thought filming was the right thing, she said to no one in particular, to the air that had held the sirens. So there'd be a record. There is a record, Linda said. These officers are wearing cameras. So are half your doorbells. There are always records. The question is whether anyone will listen to what they show. Ethan shifted, releasing a small, hiccuping breath. Mom, he whispered. Can we go inside now? We can, Linda said. She kissed his forehead again, a small benediction. But give me your leaf first, the red one. He reached into the box with a care that made everyone else's hands look clumsy. The red leaf lay on his palm like a heart. Thank you, she said. She tucked it into the pocket of her blazer as if it were something you might present in a court of law. Then she faced Harris. You'll file this as a false report, she said. It wasn't a question. Harris didn't look at Martha. He looked at the fact of the thing. We'll file the report, he said. Under my name? Martha blurted. Under your name, Linda confirmed. And when someone asks why you did it, you'll tell the truth. Maybe for the first time today. I told the truth, Martha insisted, almost pleading now. He was at the mailboxes. He said the wrong address. He had a box of leaves, Mrs. Lynn said, a tremor turning the word leaves into something almost holy. My son used to collect bottle caps. He was 6. He thought they were treasure. We kept them in a jar. He said they were stars that fell and got stuck. Martha blinked at her like she'd spoken in a language only children know. My grandson talks to the ceiling fan, Mr. Patel admitted, surprising himself. He laughed once, helpless. He says it's a helicopter keeping the room safe. He salutes it every night. The street softened, an edge at a time, as if something had untensed in the concrete itself. Doyle scrubbed a hand over his face like he wanted to erase his own expression. Judge Johnson, he said, clipping off the word judge as if it might lodge. If the kid had just given a straight address. He did, Rhea said. Under pressure, twice, he corrected himself. He's 8, Doyle's jaw worked. He didn't argue. He didn't agree. He stared at his boots like they needed inspection. Linda shifted her weight, and the movement made a whisper with the fabric of her suit. I'm going to say this once, she said. Not for apology. For instruction. She stepped down one stair, close enough that Harris could smell the faint citrus of her lotion and the paper-dry rustle of the leaf in her pocket. When you arrive on a call like this, she said, you treat a child like a child. You scan the scene for harm. You de-escalate. You call a guardian, and you wait. You don't let a civilian's fear outrun your judgment. And when someone tries to turn curiosity into a crime, you call that what it is. Harris absorbed it like weather. He had been on the job long enough to have heard every version of anger. This wasn't that. This was a witness statement from the person in the room who could see over the furniture. We'll review, he said. It was as much as he could promise without stepping into admissions he'd have to carry later. Linda held his gaze a beat longer, then nodded once. Good, she said. Because you won't always arrive at a house where someone can meet you in a suit with a badge and a title that makes you listen. You need to learn to listen when none of that is here. Reyes exhaled like someone had uncinched a belt around her ribs. Understood, she said. She looked at Ethan. May I apologize to you? Ethan blinked. He looked at his mother, then back at Reyes. I'm sorry I scared you, Reyes said, the words clear enough to land. I should have done better. Ethan nodded, slow like a sleepy animal considering whether a hand was safe. It's okay, he whispered, and it was, and it wasn't. But the saying of it laid something down between them that could be crossed later. A door banged at the end of the block. 2 teenagers on skateboards stalled and watched with the solemnity of kids who know when something adult is happening and want to memorize it to perform. Later. Linda turned, gathering Ethan closer. We're going inside, she said again, and this time the street moved to make space. As she climbed the steps, the bamboo chime thinned the moment with a scatter of notes. At the door, Linda paused. She looked back at Martha, and her expression at last held something besides fire. It held fatigue. It held the recognition that a fight can be both necessary and heartbreaking. You were a teacher once, she said. It wasn't a question. She had noticed the poster edges in the back of Martha's window, the tub of laminated sight words half hidden behind a ficus. You know what 8 looks like? Martha's eyes flicked, startled. How did you? I pay attention, Linda said. It's my job. She adjusted the leaf in her pocket with her free hand. You should too. She opened the door and guided Ethan inside. The house accepted them with a hush that felt almost medicinal. The cool of the entry tile against Ethan's sneakers. The familiar smell of their laundry detergent. The faint after-scent of the pasta Linda had made the night before. Rex's cottony head rubbed under Ethan's chin, as if to say, there you are. The door clicked shut. Outside, the street exhaled in pieces. Harris rolled his shoulders, as if resetting the angle of his day. Wrap it, he told Doyle, who nodded once and headed for the cruiser to log the end of the call. Reyes stayed where she was, studying the place where the boy had stood. The small scuff his sneaker had left on the curb. Martha shuffled in her spot, suddenly unsure what to do with her arms. She looked smaller without outrage to fill her coat. Mr. Patel took a step toward her and stopped, not because he was afraid, but because he didn't know whether mercy would be received or rejected. Mrs. Lynn picked up her watering can and, after a second, tilted it, letting the thin stream spill harmlessly into the grass as if that counted as something like ritual. The gym-clad woman lifted her phone again and aimed it at the ground, then at the sky, then put it face down beside her. She'd have to decide later whether to post what she'd filmed or to delete it and live with the knowledge either way. Inside, Linda set the leaf box on the kitchen table. She poured a glass of water and pressed it into Ethan's hands. He drank in short, fast gulps, the way kids do, water thick with relief. She dampened a dishcloth, dabbed at his cheeks, his nose. "Tell me what happened," she said, and he did, with the halting logic of a child out of order, repeating the parts where his fears spiked, forgetting details that would matter to a report, but keeping the ones that matter to a mother. The tone Martha used, the word device, the way the siren sounded inside his chest. When he was finished, he set the glass down carefully, as if noise might bring the street back into the kitchen. "Am I in trouble?" he asked. "Sweetheart," she said, "you are not in trouble." She put a finger under his chin until his eyes met hers. "You did everything right. You asked for help. You stayed put. You told the truth. What if the truth doesn't work?" He whispered. "Then we make it," she said. Brick by brick, he slipped off the chair and into her lap, all knees and elbows, and she let him be too big because sometimes kids need to be small to reset the world. He tucked Rex between them. She felt the faint thud of his pulse in the soft spot just below his ear. The red leaf waited on the table by the box. Linda took it gently and held it up. Sunlight from the window lit it from behind, making the veins glow. "What's it say?" she asked. Ethan considered. He tilted his head as if listening for translation. "It says, 'I found you,'" he said at last. "It says I found you and you found me. That's a good letter," Linda said. And something in her unclenched dot, a knock sounded at the door. 3 careful taps. Linda stiffened. Ethan went hard as wood against her. She stood, set him down, and went to the foyer. Through the peephole, she saw Reyes, alone, hands visible at her sides. Linda opened the door half a foot. "Yes?" "I won't keep you," Reyes said. Her voice stayed on the porch, didn't try to enter the house. "I just wanted to tell you I documented what I saw. All of it, including the neighbor's language. Including my own errors." Linda held the door that extra inch. "Thank you," Reyes nodded. "There's a policy update rolling through training," she said quietly, almost like a confession. "We're supposed to treat juvenile calls as de-escalation first." "I knew that, and I didn't push hard enough." Linda didn't soothe her. "That wasn't her job." "Then push next time," she said. "Before a mother has to arrive." Reyes dipped her head. "I will." She started to step back, then paused. "Tell him the T-Rex looked brave," she said. A small something offered without an expectation of return. Linda's mouth twitched. "I will." She closed the door. Ethan stood behind her, bare feet silent on the hardwood now, sneakers kicked off at the mat like always. "Who was it?" "An officer," she said. She said Rex looked brave. Ethan looked at the dinosaur, surprised. Then, for the first time that day, he smiled for real. "He is," he said. "He doesn't run." "No," Linda said. "He doesn't." They returned to the kitchen. The glass of water had a ring under it. The leaf box waited. Outside, engines turned over. A cruiser pulled away. The bamboo chime spoke once and fell still. In houses up and down the block, neighbors began to talk, some to themselves, some to each other. Some phones that would carry their versions of the afternoon into rooms far from Silver Pines. There would be texts, and next-door threads, and a late-night argument in a kitchen where someone would say, "It wasn't about race," and someone else would say, "Then why did it feel exactly like it was?" There would be a homeowners meeting with a folding table and paper cups of bad coffee. There would be a form with boxes to check and a line for description, where a woman would have to write what she had said out loud and see how ugly it looked in ink. For now, the street was quiet. The mailboxes were just metal again. The pothole leaf, disturbed by all those shoes, had slid into the gutter grate and stuck there, bright against the dark. Linda found the small album where Ethan taped his best leaves, a book thick with seasons. She opened to a blank page, laid the red leaf down, and pressed it under parchment. "Let's name it," she said. Ethan leaned over, pencil poised. He printed carefully, tongue between teeth, the way he did with spelling words. "The day the wind spoke loud." He dated it in the corner, numbers neat and square. He added in smaller letters, as if embarrassed by how much he wanted it to be true, "We are safe." Linda watched him write. For a moment, she let herself believe this sentence could hold. She knew better. Safety wasn't a finish line. It was a practice, daily, stubborn, built in moments like this and all the small ones that never make a record. But she didn't take the pencil from him. She let him claim it. Outside, someone raked a yard. The gentle scrape, a normal sound returning. Inside, Linda breathed with her son until their breaths matched. The afternoon slid toward evening, and the house, which had been a place again, made room for the next thing, a phone call she would place, a complaint she would file, a meeting she would insist on. But not yet. "Can we read the letters?" Ethan asked, tapping the album. "We can," she said. They did, leaf by leaf, translating veins into stories, until the light on the table went from gold to the color of cooling tea, and the edges of the day softened enough to hold in the dark beyond the window glass. Silver Pines tried to remember what it wanted to be. The night after the incident, Silver Pines didn't sleep the way it usually did. The lawns, trimmed to perfection, seemed to breathe uneasily under the moonlight. Curtains swayed with the faint hum of air conditioning, but behind them, conversations brewed, hushed voices, arguments muffled by drywall, sentences cut short when children entered the room. Martha Cowan sat alone at her kitchen table, her phone screen glowing against the dim. The HOA group chat buzzed with new messages. "What really happened today? I heard Judge Johnson was involved. Do we need to review our safety protocols?" Martha scrolled, her stomach tightening with every line that didn't match the version she'd rehearsed in her head. She typed, deleted, retyped. Finally she sent, "I only did what I thought was best for the neighborhood." That child was suspicious. The 3 dots of her reply appeared, then disappeared. Silence. For the first time in years, Martha felt like she wasn't the one holding the chalk, drawing the rules on the board. She was the lesson now, and the class was watching. Across the street, in the Johnsons' home, the air was still heavy with the scent of dinner Linda hadn't touched. Ethan sat curled on the couch, Rex in his lap, the leaf album beside him. He traced the edge of the red leaf with one finger, his body finally loosening only when his mother's hand brushed over his hair in slow circles. "Are they coming back?" he asked quietly. "No," Linda said, steady, though she knew the truth was more complicated. "They're not coming back." But inside, her mind was already running. Reports, complaints, legal statutes. She knew the system she served wasn't built to protect children like hers, not consistently, not without pressure. Tonight had been one skirmish. Tomorrow the war resumed. Meanwhile, in the patrol car parked on the edge of the precinct lot, Officer Reyes sat in the passenger seat, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Harris was finishing paperwork inside. Doyle had gone silent, jaw working like he was chewing something tough. "You think she'd file a complaint?" Doyle muttered. "She should," Reyes said. Doyle shot her a look. "You siding with her now?" Reyes didn't flinch. "I'm siding with the truth. That was a kid. 8 years old. And we let it go too far." Harris slid back into the driver's seat, dropping the clipboard on the dash. "Enough," he said. "It's done." We responded. "No arrest was made. No harm." "No harm?" Reyes's voice sharpened. "You didn't see his face when Doyle reached for him. That kid will remember this every time he sees a cruiser." Harris rubbed his eyes, exhaustion lining his face. "We don't get to pick and choose calls. We respond. That's the job." "No," Reyes said quietly but firmly. "The job is to protect. Not to terrify children because a neighbor can't handle her own prejudice." The silence that followed was thick. Even Doyle didn't push back this time. Back in Silver Pines, the street was almost empty. Only one figure lingered, Mr. Patel, standing by his mailbox, staring at the dark outline of the Johnson house. He thought of his grandson again. Thought of what it would mean if the boy had been his. He wanted to walk over, knock on the door, tell Linda he was sorry for not shouting louder, for not stepping in sooner, but his feet didn't move. Instead, he whispered into the night, "We saw. We'll remember." The wind carried his words, scattering them across manicured lawns and shuttered windows. Inside the Johnson home, Linda tucked Ethan into bed. He clutched Rex, the dinosaur's fabric damp from the tears that had finally slowed. "Mom?" And his voice was a fragile thread. "Yes, baby. If I find another leaf tomorrow. Is it okay if I keep it?" Linda's throat tightened. "Of course, always." And as she kissed his forehead, she made herself a promise. No one, not Martha, not a misguided officer, not the weight of an entire system, would ever take away her son's right to believe in leaves and wind and magic. That night, Silver Pines didn't settle into its usual quiet. Phones buzzed across the neighborhood, the HOA chat flooding with messages. Did the cops really stop that boy? I heard Judge Johnson came out herself. Martha crossed the line this time. Martha sat alone at her kitchen table, the glow of her phone washing her face pale. She typed, "I only acted for the safety of the neighborhood." The boy was acting suspicious. No one replied. It felt as if the whole street had silently turned its back on her. Across the road, Linda sat beside Ethan's bed. He clutched Rex against his chest, eyelids heavy, but worry keeping him awake. "Mom, if I pick up leaves tomorrow, will they call the police again?" She kissed his forehead, her voice firm. "No, and if anyone tries, I'll be standing right there." Outside, neighbors whispered on porches. He was just collecting leaves. This was shameful for all of us. The wind stirred the bamboo chime on the Johnson porch, each note thin and fragile, as if the air itself was keeping score. At the precinct, Reyes wrote her report, line by line, refusing to leave anything out. Doyle stayed quiet, jaw locked, while Harris only sighed. "We followed procedure," he muttered. Reyes didn't look up. Procedure isn't supposed to turn kids into suspects. Near dawn, Linda opened her laptop. Her fingers moved fast, drafting the official complaint. Then she began a statement meant for more than the police. She knew protecting only her son wasn't enough. This moment had to echo. In the next room, Ethan finally slept, Rex wedged under his chin. On his desk, the red leaf rested inside his album. By lamplight, Linda wrote 3 words beneath it. "This is where it begins." Silver Pines had no idea what morning would bring. But one thing was certain, the storm had broken, and no one could pretend the skies were clear again. By morning, the story had already slipped beyond Silver Pines. Someone's video made it onto Facebook, another onto TikTok. Clips of Ethan clutching his stuffed dinosaur while police hovered over him looped again and again, shared by strangers who didn't know his name but felt the weight of what they saw. 8 years old, the captions read. Arrested for picking up leaves. Linda hadn't planned to go public so quickly, but the storm was already raging. By noon, reporters were parked at the cul-de-sac entrance, cameras aimed like weapons of a different kind. She stepped onto her porch in a navy blazer, Ethan safe inside. Her voice was steady, her words sharp as glass. My son was treated as a suspect because of the color of his skin. He was collecting leaves. He's 8 years old. What happened here is not just about one call or one neighbor. It's about a system that too easily sees black children as threats. The microphones caught every word. By evening, they were on the local news, then the state stations, then national feeds. Silver Pines, with its clean lawns and quiet streets, became a headline. Martha tried to fight back. She posted long explanations online about safety, about vigilance, about doing her duty, but her words only fed the fire. The clip of her yelling, "He doesn't belong here," played on repeat. The internet turning it into both proof and indictment. At the precinct, the chief announced an internal review. Officers Harris, Doyle, and Reyes were placed under investigation. Reyes filed her own supplemental report, making it clear she had disagreed. Doyle muttered about public opinion ruining good cops, but no one was listening. Neighbors who had once smiled politely at Martha now crossed the street to avoid her. OA members began whispering about removing her from the board. Her phone no longer buzzed with support-only silence or strangers' fury. In the Johnson house, Ethan added the red leaf to his album and wrote beneath it, in his careful block letters, "The day Mom made the world listen." Linda watched him, pride mingling with exhaustion. She knew this was only the beginning. But beginnings mattered. The twist was clear now. What had started as a neighbor's petty call wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. It was a reckoning, and Silver Pines had become the stage. Within weeks, the ripples hardened into consequences. The HOA board met in a tense evening session. Martha sat stiff in a folding chair while her neighbor's people, she once lectured about lawn lengths and garbage bins, looked her straight in the eye. The vote to remove her from the Neighborhood Watch Committee was unanimous. Stripped of the small authority she clung to, Martha left the meeting without a word, face pale, phone clutched like a shield. At the precinct, the review ended with a mandate. Every officer in the county would undergo new training on racial bias in child encounters. Harris accepted it quietly, the lines on his face deeper than before. Reyes embraced it, determined to push harder next time. Doyle bristled, muttering about politics, but even he showed up to the sessions because now, everyone was watching. For Linda, the fight didn't end with her complaint. She used the momentum to push a county-wide initiative, standing before cameras and council members alike. No child, she declared, should be criminalized for their innocence. Not mine, not anyone's, her words carried. Lawsuits were filed, policies debated, petitions signed. Silver Pines had never seen so many reporters, or so many angry residents demanding change. And Ethan? He returned to his leaves. Each afternoon, he pedaled his bike down the street, Rex tucked in his basket, box in hand. Neighbors who once averted their eyes now waved. Some kids even joined him, adding their own finds to his collection. The mailbox that had once been a stage for humiliation became just another stop on his treasure hunt. One evening, Linda watched from the porch as Ethan spread his leaves across the grass. Other children gathered around him. Their laughter rose into the soft dusk, cutting through weeks of tension like sunlight, breaking storm clouds. For the first time in a long time, she let herself breathe. The fight wasn't over, she knew that. But her son had reclaimed his joy, and that was its own kind of victory. A month later, the Johnson yard looked different. On the grass, a circle of children crouched around Ethan's leaf album. He turned the pages like a curator unveiling treasures, his voice excited but steady. "This one's from the big oak near the park. And this one's from the churchyard." The kids leaned closer, their own leaves clutched in small fists, eager to contribute. For Ethan, the fear had softened. He still remembered the flashing lights, the heavy boots, the way Martha's voice cut him down. But now, Each new leaf he pressed into the book felt like reclaiming something stolen. Linda sat on the porch steps, watching. She had meetings ahead, policy fights, press interviews, more nights spent drafting reform proposals. But for this moment, she let herself simply be a mother. She smiled as Ethan held up the red leaf, the one that had started everything, now flattened and safe under clear film. This one, Ethan told the group, is the most special. Because it reminds me that even when people don't believe you, the truth still stays. You just have to keep it safe. The kids nodded. Solemn in that way children are when they sense something bigger than themselves. Linda blinked back tears. Silver Pines wasn't perfect. Now change came slow, like grass pushing through concrete. But the silence was gone. Neighbors greeted her with more than politeness. Some apologized outright. Even the HOA board sent a formal letter acknowledging what happened. The wind picked up, rattling the bamboo chime on the porch. Leaves scattered across the yard. The children laughed, chasing them, arms wide as if catching pieces of sky. Ethan ran too, Rex tucked tight under his arm. His laughter sharp and clear. Linda looked down at the album lying open on the grass, pages fluttering in the breeze. The red leaf held fast, unmoving, a bright heart against pale paper. For her, it wasn't just a leaf anymore. It was proof. Proof that wounds could heal, that a child's innocence could be defended, that even in a place like Silver Pines, justice could take root. And as she watched her son race through the falling leaves, Linda let herself believe, for the first time in weeks, that hope wasn't fragile. It was stubborn, like the wind itself, always finding a way through. In the end, the red leaf that almost branded Ethan a suspect became something else, a symbol of hope, pressed into his album forever. Silver Pines learned that isn't just written in courts, it's written in how we protect our children. And Ethan? He went back to his leaves, his laughter filling the street like sunlight, breaking through a storm. If this story moves you, share it, let